Absolute Flash number 1 from DC Comics races onto shelves on March 19th, 2025, and it sparks a wild twist when Wally West's bored life as an army brat explodes into a supercharged chase. Is it worth running out to your comic book shop? Let's find out in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. Before we dive in, let's provide a little context for this number 1 issue. Darkseid, the cosmic tyrant, fused every version of himself across the multiverse into one ultimate form. He invaded our universe, which is Earth Prime, and let the Justice League take him down permanently. In the resultant explosion, his death unleashed a new reality powered by Darkseid energy. That's where we pick up with Wally West's story. In Absolute Flash number 1, we catch up with 15-year-old Wally West, an army brat bouncing between bases with his strict dad, Colonel Rudy West. The boy is sharp, but connecting with kids his age is a bit of a struggle. It's not his thing, and his dad's cold shoulder doesn't help since his mother passed away. One night, Wally's late sneaking back from town, and Barry Allen, this clever scientist who works on base, spots Wally's potential and the spark within him. Barry offers to show off his lab, a top-secret experiment that is hush-hush named Project Olympus. But Wally's not sold completely on deciding to work part-time for Barry, especially when Colonel West storms in and drags him home. The next day, after Wally has a blowout with his dad over his loner mentality, Wally bolts over to Barry Allen's lab anyway to maybe talk to him and figure out if he can work for him or not. Unfortunately, his arrival is bad timing. He walks in on Project Olympus, some high-stakes test in the middle of execution, and an explosion happens which takes out Barry Allen, killing him, and Wally's hit with searing energy pulses. The issue wraps up with him tearing through the desert, hunted by a special operations crew with a Flash rogue gallery type of vibe to them. Think Flash's classic foes, but a little bit more on the military side. So what's my first impression of Absolute Flash number 1? It's a sci-fi origin tale with plenty of grit, and I mostly like what's happening here, although there's a bit of a problem. We'll get to that in a minute. Jeff Lemire gives us a Wally who is familiar yet fresh, but the details are a little bit lacking. So the basic structure is there, and the setup kind of works, but you're not going to be blown away with it because there are some gaps and some plot holes that you have to wrestle with. Let's talk about the art for a second. We have Nick Robles providing pencils and inks, and he, I think, overall brings his A game. Wally's in nearly every panel, so he's very much the focus of this issue, and he looks like a pretty believable everyday teenager. From the clothes to the attitude, from the facial expressions, everything is spot on. The action is pretty frantic, capturing a kid who's reeling from a disaster rather than a kid who's now a speedster and just enjoys everything that's going on around him. He's still pretty shook up by the incident that gives him his power. It's all about his emotions, and Robles nails that vibe perfectly. Talking about pros and cons, what's great about Absolute Flash number 1? Jeff Lemire crafts a Flash story that feels like something that's very familiar, feels very comforting, very much like home from what you would expect from a Flash origin story. But it's different enough that it stands apart. Wally stumbling into chaos is pure origin gold. I mean, that's as classic as it gets when you have a kid wandering into an experiment and getting zapped with all these powers. The Rogues-inspired operations folks, they look pretty darn cool too, and I'm looking forward to see how the bad guys interact with the good guys in a classic superhero scenario. So talking about the cons, what's not great about Absolute Flash number 1? Here's the basic problem. The setup is classic, the structure is very familiar, it all works at a very rough general level. It's hard to not kind of buy into what's going on here, but there is something that keeps you from buying into what's going on here. Barry lets a bored kid into a top secret lab on a military base. Okay, fine, you can sort of maybe see that happening, but in the second scene where the accident occurs, Wally just enters in by himself, waltzes right back into the middle of the experiment in process, and there is no resistance whatsoever. He's not faced with security, he doesn't have to go through locked doors, he doesn't have to deal with any kind of special lock mechanisms or show a badge, nothing. What is the deal with that? Don't these doors have locks? This is a military base. It's a top secret experiment. It could be very dangerous. Why on earth would a teenage kid just be able to walk in there unaccosted, unchallenged in any way? It doesn't make sense. No, for God's sake. It's like the Darkseid universe forgot how military bases work, and it feels a bit rushed to force that big moment without thinking through those details, and honestly, it feels a little bit lazy. What's the final verdict on Absolute Flash number 1? It reimagines Wally West's start when a restless teen stumbles into fate-changing chaos. Jeff Lemire leans on a timeless hook and structure for a superhero origin story, though it really does struggle with plot holes and believability in several spots, and that's a downer. However, Nick Robles' art shines pretty bright. Therefore, Absolute Flash #1 from DC Comics earns a 6.5 out of 10. Leave a thumbs up if you felt this review was helpful, and let me know in the comments what is your prediction for what's going to happen to the new Wally West. We see how his origin is a little bit different. Where should it be very different beyond just the costume? So thank you very much for joining, and stay tuned through the outro for more reviews just like this one.